Okay, so let's look here at this note guide, The Greatness of the Roman Empire. Now I'm zoomed in here on the left, and here's what we're going to do. I'm going to basically show you through this slideshow here one more time, but this time we're just going to focus on the note guide, so you know what you should be writing down, and so I can help to explain that information just a little bit more clearly as we go. So we're going to start over here with our first section here, which is on the background of Rome. So I'm not going to go through every single slide since we've already done them quite a few times here. But again, the goal, we're trying to look at the best parts of Rome that made it such a strong civilization, with our goal being for the end of this to be able to understand why it's going to be really difficult for people in Europe when the Roman Empire falls apart. They no longer have all the things that they did have with Rome. So let's start off here with this section on the right about the facts of the Roman Empire. At its height, it was huge. And it lasted about 500 years, depending on which historian you used. So let's talk about some of the specifics with this. First off, it lasted about 500 years. This is the third note you see down here. Approximately 30 BCE to 476 CE. Again, those dates could vary depending on the historian that you use, but in general, it's around 500 years that we're looking at for the Roman Empire. It was very large and powerful. I'll show you a map here with that in a few minutes, as well as how it extended throughout Europe. So when you look at this map, what we previously looked at, the goal is to see how many different countries make up Europe now. But when you look back at the time of when the Roman Empire was at its peak, it comprised all of this green, all the orange, and all of the red areas. And that's a pretty large area if you really think about it from that perspective. So extremely large, extremely powerful, and lasts a really, really long time too. There were a lot of great things in Rome. We've seen the Colosseum and the aqueducts and some of the architecture. And as I mentioned before, it was very strong, very civilized, but also is very old. And that's something that gets pretty difficult to maintain for a long time. Let's move over now to the organization here. The organization, Rome was very organized. Why? Well, they had a census every 5 years that helped to keep track of everybody, so you can write down census every 5 years. That helped to keep track of all the people. They liked to keep their country very organized, so they knew who was living there because it helped for the military and also other purposes. Very, very important. They had a monetary system. You can see that here. I have a picture. I'll come back to that one here in a few minutes. And let's talk about this really quickly with the census. With the census, when you have this large of an area, you do need to know who's living in your area, not necessarily every single person to a T, but you need to know how many people there are, because that tells you how much you need to be protecting certain areas and how many people you have at your disposal, because that is the way that these types of empires looked at things. Next, the monetary system. Why is this so important? Well, envision you don't have a monetary system. You don't have coins. How do you actually sell your items? Let's say that you are a farmer and you have a bunch of grain, but you need to get something, let's say a farm tool that's metal. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to have to hopefully trade your grain for that farm tool, but how many barrels of grain is worth one farm tool? Well, it's not very easy. When you can use money, you can say, here's a set amount that everybody knows what it is, and it makes it much easier for you to be able to trade and get goods. So overall, a monetary system like Rome had, very, very important. On to the government. There were two different types of government, as we discussed previously. The first government was a republic, which means it was a government that was ruled by elected officials. In other words, people got to vote and you had a say in your government. That's a good thing. That's what we like here in America. At least I should say that's what most people think is a good thing. Later on, though, it switches over to a dictatorship, meaning there was one person with all of the power. So again, you can see where we're getting these notes here on the left. So it starts as a republic where people vote, and you can see here in the image on the right, all citizen males were allowed to vote for who would be the senators and tribunes, and they could vote on the consuls. But it ends with a dictatorship, all the powers in one person. That first one was Julius Caesar, which is why in Rome, as you may remember, they say Caesar is the leader's name. Next, let's get on to some religion here. Early on, religion was polytheistic. Polytheistic, meaning they believed in many gods. Poly is the prefix for many. It was similar to the Greeks, and all the work was done for the glory of the gods. So when you look at farming, there was a god of farming. When you look at wars, there's a god of wars. And that gave these people a great source of motivation, because you're going to war, you're fighting there for Mars, you want to make sure you do well, because you don't want the gods to be upset and angry with you, or they could punish you. And that was a fear these people had. In 391, the official switch was made to Christianity, which was very different because it was monotheistic, believing in one God. And it changes a lot of things there in Europe, because now A lot of things are different with the way that people viewed life, because no longer is it such a great thing to go and fight and win military victories, because there's no God that you're doing it for, and in reality, if you look at the teachings there, it probably didn't even align with that. So that's where the religion piece is a big change, and shortly thereafter we'll see that the country does fall apart to some extent. So let's get back down here now. Onto this, the major issues facing Rome. First off, we have wars with barbarians. Barbarians are outsiders, and you'll see the official definition. It's something you'll have to do for homework tomorrow. But they're basically just outsiders. We'll say that for now. A lot of people started attacking Rome because they realized they couldn't protect everything. Because if you remember how big Rome was, very, very challenging. And Rome isn't going to find many allies on the outside because they've taken over so much land. So they're going to be kind of stuck in that situation. Second, we have government instability. There was corruption, which deals with the government being very self-serving, and you'll see a little bit more about that as well in your next lesson. But there were also quite a few assassinations. When there's an elected official, and I'm going to kind of slide back up here to explain this to you. When there are elected officials like there are here, when we were looking at the government in the old republic, assassinating somebody is not really a good idea, because if you assassinate somebody, nobody's going to vote for you, correct? Well, if there's a dictatorship and you kill the person who's going to be the dictator or is a dictator, and you're in position to move into it, you can kill them and then just move into the position of power. The problem with that is that you had everybody killing everybody, and it's not really a good situation overall. So that's where the government instability comes in. Third, the economy being weakened. With slavery, here's the big problem. They had so many slaves in Rome, but they didn't have enough jobs for everybody who wanted to work. And what happens when you have unemployment? That's something that you'll see here later on, and that's something you need to really make sure you understand. Unemployment's not a good thing for our country, because then you have people who are unemployed trying to find work or trying to find food and necessary things, and they sometimes do it in bad ways. Or the government's going to have to provide for those people and give them food even though they're not doing anything to earn it. And that becomes a really, really big problem. Inflation was another problem too, because the value of the money started being hampered, and that caused a lot more economic issues. So overall, the buying and selling power of people in Rome was really getting weakened, and that caused some major issues. And lastly, the logistical problems. It was too big to govern and protect effectively and efficiently. Without modern technology, controlling all of that land is a very, very challenging thing. In Rome, they suffered through it quite a bit. So those are the notes on this section. If you need to go through this a couple times, go through it a couple times, and make sure you do understand, though, what made Rome powerful and what some of those things are that they're now facing at the end here, partially due to the fact that it was so powerful. Okay, I hope that helped.